In February of 2012, Samia's parents arranged for her to get married to her own first cousin, Shakil. When Samia was told she was going to marry her cousin Shakil, she hated the idea. This was someone she had known all her life as her brother. Plus, Shakil had just gotten out of jail from shooting someone over a land dispute in their home country of Pakistan. You see, Samia was born in the UK, so she was a British citizen, and Shakil would do anything to become a British citizen. This was why when Samia traveled to Pakistan for her aunt's funeral, she ends up being assaulted and strangled by her own family for daring to disobey and dishonor them by divorcing Shakil. Welcome to my channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Don't you love my videos? Kindly subscribe and click on that notification bell so that you don't miss any of my upload as we look into the case of Samia Shahid. Samia Shahid was a very gorgeous girl who loved fashion, beauty and makeup like most girls do. She lived in Bradford with her family who are Pakistanis and had attended Nabwood School. Her friends describe her as a very lively and bubbly, almost goofy kind of, very jovial and accommodating and super loyal to the core. Samia was so beautiful, it was hard to miss the tall, stunning young lady. To know Samia was to know love. She loved love and always wanted to be around people who loved her and whom she loved too. Growing up in Bradford, Samia, who was British by birth, was born right there in Manningham, Bradford in 1987 into a strong Sunni Muslim family that had immigrated from Pandori village in Punjab, Pakistan. She was brought up in the Pakistani culture, but she grew up in the UK. That means the culture she was being exposed to was a little bit different from what she was being taught at home. For instance, Samia loved driving fast cars, but she was not allowed to drive a car at all. Talk more of fast cars. Even though the family owned a very successful car hiring business, it was almost like a taboo for her to drive. So what Samia would do was hire a car under a false name from her family business and take it out for a spin. She had to live her life somehow. How could she not be able to do something as simple as driving a car when younger people are seen driving all over the UK? She had this group of friends that were all patient, so they understood her even though she was older than them. They all came from the Middle East, and even though their families were more lenient and not as strict on them as Samia's family were, they understood her struggles of not being in control of her own life even as an adult. But Samia didn't necessarily care about what her family thought. She was going to do whatever she wanted, and she did whatever she wanted. If her family asked her not to do something, which was almost likely everything that young girls her age were doing, she would say okay, then she would go and do it anyways, but without their knowledge, of course. One unmistakable thing though was that Samia loved her family. She was most closest to her dad. In fact, she was the true definition of a daddy's girl. Her father gave her everything she wanted. So even if she never had to work a day in her life, she could if she wanted. But she did work briefly at a local Bradford post office. Samia was her father's favorite, and everyone knew that. Even her only sister Madiha did. But being the favorite came at a price. It meant that whatever daddy said was law. It must be done. There was no way around it. You didn't give an excuse. You just do whatever daddy says. Samia's family was quite big. The ones that lived in the UK. It said that her mother had like 5 brothers who all lived in the UK, and they opened several successful businesses. So they were actually well off. Samia's extended family were all related by blood. So let me break it down for you, yeah? Every marriage that was held in that family was amongst themselves. Her mother was her father's cousin, but they still got married. All her uncles and aunties were married to cousins and nephews and nieces. It was the culture, so they married each other, if not for nothing, to keep the wealth within the family. Samia's friends that she hung out with said that her family was so complicated. Her family believed that no matter what happens to you and around you, the Pakistani value and culture is paramount. The tradition was paramount, no matter what. Family comes first. No matter how badly you're being treated in the family, you can't do anything or even think of going against them because family is family and family is the ultimate. This made Samia to bottle up a lot of secrets. Yes, she has so many secrets because who would she talk to in her family? They are not supportive, especially when it had anything to do with what is not considered part of the culture, which was a lot of things. Samia loved her family too much to want to trouble them or give them any reason to be upset, so she kept secrets instead. In February of 2012, Samia's parents arranged for her to get married to her own first cousin called Chaudhry Muhammad Shakil. By this time, Samia was 25 years old, I think. Shakil didn't even reside in the UK. He lived in the village in Punjab, Pakistan. The plan was that after he gets married to Samia, they would then file for him to come over to the UK. I guess this was how the other members of the family managed to move to the UK too, by marrying each other. When Samia was told she was going to marry her cousin Shakil, she hated the idea. This was someone she had known all her life as her brother. Her mother tried to convince her to do as her family says. She even tried to talk to one of Samia's friends' parents, asking them to help convince Samia to marry Shakil. She was supposed to travel to Pakistan for this marriage, but she didn't want to. She told her friends that she really didn't want to get married to her cousin, and the fact that the family only wanted her to marry Shakil because they wanted to keep their land back home in Pakistan. Plus, her father had promised Shakil he would marry his daughter so he could be brought over to the UK, disgusted her so much. Why were they treating her like a piece of furniture? Understandably, it's their Pakistani culture to marry into the family in order to keep the family inheritance all within the family. But why would anyone want to marry off their daughter without her consent, a full-grown adult at that? Plus, the worst part of it was that this man Shakil had just gotten out of jail in Pakistan for shooting someone in a land dispute. This was the man they thought was the right fit for their daughter. Oh yes, Shakil shooting that man was to protect the honor of their family. So in their eyes, he did no wrong. He was the man of honor. How do you get an ex-convict for a child you claim to love? And to think that the father whom Samia adored, I meant to say, so much, was the one championing this arrangement. It hurt her to the core. But as the pressure continued to mount and to become too unbearable for her, she accepted to marry Shakil, even though she clearly wasn't happy. The women in the family took Samia shopping in preparation for her wedding in Pakistan. They went to the Pakistani bazaar on Killing Hall Road in Bradford, where they bought everything she liked and would need. Money was not a problem, so there was no budget. So her wedding outfit was gotten from the Pakistani bazaar in the UK, like I said. There was lots and lots of jewelry and change of clothes, but Samia still wasn't happy. She had only gone along with all these plans for the sake of her family because their word was law and she did not have a choice. On the day that Samia was to leave the UK for Pakistan, which was on the 15th of February 2012, her friends accompanied her to the airport. They stayed with her as she cried till she boarded the plane. As she sat in that plane waiting for it to take off, she sends a text to one of her friends. She says, "I can't believe this is happening." Her friends said they could feel how suffocated Samia was for not being able to do anything for herself when she was being treated like a commodity. When she arrived in Pakistan, Shakil came to pick her up from the airport. Samia sends a voice note to her friend. She says, quote, "I got happy that I didn't get sick on him at the airport." She actually thought that she would be so disgusted by the sight of him that she might actually puke all over him, but she didn't. When her friend asked if she at least gave her husband to be a hug, she said F no, that her body was looking forward but her head was turned to the right, that she couldn't even look at him, talk more of hugging him. Just imagine how she felt towards someone she's supposed to marry and spend the rest of her life with. It's almost like she was also angry at Shakil for agreeing to such an arrangement when he knew she didn't like him that way. For him, it was all a family business transaction. Nothing was going to stop him from marrying Samia and moving to the UK with her. So Samia now in Pakistan is not happy. It was just days before her wedding and she was giving everyone an attitude, including Shakil, who even though they weren't married yet, was now demanding that she catered to him, like cook his meal and serve him food. But Samia would have loved to prolong any form of contact with her cousin Shakil until they actually got married. Now, the wedding day came. It was the 27th of February in Jhelum, Pakistan, and the women began to dress Samia up, but she wasn't happy. She was only doing this so she wouldn't bring shame onto her family. Her family, on the other hand, thought that they were doing the right thing for her, but if you look at it critically, it's more like they were doing the right thing for themselves and not being considerate of Samia's feelings. Shakil knew right from jump that Samia did not want to marry him, but he insisted. The idea of marrying a UK citizen and moving over to the UK was all that was in his head. Whether Samia liked him or not, he didn't care. He was going to marry her at all costs. Well, the marriage took place, and according to Samia's friends, she just floated through the ceremony. According to Samia, it was an out-of-body experience for her. She just glided through it and just wanted for her family to be happy and to get it over and done with, so that she could return back to her life in the UK. After the wedding, Samia was moved into the mansion her father had built for her and her cousin turned new husband Shakil. They lived together as the family immediately began to make arrangements for Shakil to move to the UK with Samia. In the meantime, Samia tried to fake a happy marriage so her family would just leave her alone. She did her duties as a wife and kept a happy demeanor, but inside she was hurting. She hated being married to Shakil and she only had her friends back in the UK to vent to. They would all text back and forth and send voice notes to each other, and they knew Samia was miserable in Pakistan. At a point, Samia decided to try. She said for the sake of her father, whom she loved so much, she wanted to give the marriage a chance. So she began to try to make it work, but still she wasn't happy. I mean, Shaki and her were polar opposites. He was domineering and crude. He believed he was lord over her, and she, as a British citizen, knew what it was like to be free. Even though back in the UK, her family caged her, but Shakil, he was on another level. And Samia, having tried and tried to make the marriage work, just sunk into some sort of deep bitterness and depression. By June of 2012, Samia returned to the UK alone without Shakil. She was to apply for Shakil's visa when she got back, so she moved back into her family's home in Bradford, and the family didn't allow her to as much as move outside the house anymore. She was caged basically. Her friends said that when she got back to the UK, they could feel that drastic shift in her, not towards them of course, but towards her family. She who loved and adored her family so much was now full of hatred and bitterness towards them. She hated not being allowed to go out or socialize with her friends. She became very, very sad. She told her friends in a text message that she was depressed and she hated the type of life that she was living. Her family was controlling her and Shaki was controlling her all the way from Pakistan. He would constantly be on Skype with her 24/7 so he could monitor what she was doing, and she felt choked by all of this. She said even on Skype, Shaki would constantly put fear in her, like, you can't do this, you can't do that, that's my wife, if you do this, this is what will happen, these are the repercussions, and that freaked her out the more. Was it the type of life she was going to live for the rest of her life? Samia tried to talk to her family about how unhappy she was, but they wouldn't hear it. They told her to suck it up and learn to be a good wife. She tried, but she constantly was being put down by Shakil, and gradually that feeling of hopelessness began to creep in. In July of 2012, I think on the 28th of that month, Samia sends a voice note to her friend. She says, quote, I'm going insane. I just want to die. You know when you pray for namaz and you just pray that Allah gives me death? Because I just want to die. Simple, and today was the limit, and the limit is overboard. It's gone. Mercy is dead. I don't want to live. I hate the world. F everyone. F my life. End quote. It's not exactly clear what had happened on that particular day to push Samia over the edge like that, but something did happen to her that was kept hush-hush within the family. In August of that same year, Samia sent a picture of her battered face to her friends. It's not exactly clear who did that to her or why. So now, fast forward to 2013, Samia, while in a restaurant with her friends, met this group of other guys whom they knew. These were guys from their community, but amongst them was this particular guy, Mukhtar Ali Kazam. They talked and exchanged numbers, and gradually they began texting back and forth, but just as friends. Samia was just glad she had a friend outside her normal group of friends that she could talk to about things other than her marriage. Mukhtar said, quote, "The first time we met, we were in a restaurant. I met her through a couple of my other friends. For me, at first, it was just some other girl, but gradually, when she opened up, she had a big, big love, very loud love," end quote. In October of 2013, Samia secretly met up with Mukhtar in London. Mukhtar himself was also Pakistani, but he lived and worked in Dubai. But he frequented London often. As they continued chatting over the phone, he and Samia became fond of each other. That's why they met secretly in the first place. Samia was a married woman. If her family knew she was meeting another man, she wouldn't have lasted a day. Mukhtar describes Samia as a really lively and lovely person, very naive and free-spirited. That's the exact description of the Samia her friends knew before Shakil happened. Mukhtar could not help but fall in love with her, and Samia too began to feel something for Mukhtar. Her friends said even before they knew about Mukhtar, they had seen the changes in Samia. She seemed to be happier and always with smiles, like the old Samia was coming back. Samia and Mukhtar began seeing each other often, but in secret as friends, of course, because they would only hang out in public places that Samia would choose away from the prying eyes of her family. With time, they couldn't just stay away from each other, and Mukhtar would return often to London to see Samia. Samia's friends, all the while, were keeping her secret. They say that Samia was head over heels in love with Mukhtar. She told them how happy she was, and this was what she had prayed for all her life. She just wanted to be happy. So one day while visiting, Mukhtar told Samia he would love to marry her, and she was so happy she said she would love to marry him too. So she had to come clean with Mukhtar about her situation with Shakil. She explained to him how her father had promised her cousin that he will marry her and come over to England through her, but she never liked him because he was the brother she had always known growing up, and now that they were married, she was miserable. Meanwhile, Shakil's visa application for the UK was rejected. This means that Samia will have to spend the majority of her time in Pakistan because that was where her husband was, and culture demands she be with him. And Samia wanted none of that. She decided she would rather get a divorce than move to Pakistan, so she called Shakil up and asked for a divorce. A divorce on the part of the man in Islam is not so difficult. All Shakil needed to do was to say, "I divorce you 3 times," and Samia would be free. But Shakil told her that that was never going to happen. He was not going to grant her a divorce. So what Samia did was that she secretly went by herself to see an imam in Bradford, and after explaining her situation to him, he agreed to help her get a divorce through Sharia law. But she told none of her family members about this divorce thing that she was doing secretly. She also didn't tell them the fact that she was also changing from the Sunni sect of Islam to the Shia sect. Shakil on his own part had already called everyone in UK to tell them that Samia asked him to divorce her. So for this alone, the family descended on her. Parents, sisters, uncles, aunties, cousins, all of them berated her for going against the family in trying to bring shame and or dishonor to the family name. So imagine what would happen if they found out what she had already put in motion secretly. They kept her locked inside the house 24/7. There was no going anywhere for her anymore. So her friends came over to visit her instead. Samia expressed to them how unhappy she was, and her friend asked her to leave, but she said she couldn't do that yet until she was officially divorced from Shakil. Samia's wish came through on the 1st of May 2014 when the imam granted her a divorce without the knowledge of her family. As soon as Samia had those divorce papers in her hand, she called Mukhtar to tell him the good news, and Mukhtar was on the next available flight to London. Fast forward to the 7th of September 2014, without the knowledge of her family, Samia and Mukhtar got married in a private nikah ceremony, followed by a registry that took place at Leeds City Hall and was attended by her friends who had known and kept a secret all along on the 24th of the same month. Samia wasn't who it was. She was a sweet girl who wanted to be married, to have children, but she wanted to be happy also. And at last, she was getting what she wanted. She was finally marrying a man that she loved, a man who adored the ground that she walks on. Her friends did her hand decorations on that day. They did her makeup, did her dressing, and stood by her as she got married to the love of her life. They said she was all smiles and she looked at herself in the mirror and said, I look like a princess. Oh, she was happy on that day. When it was all done and over with, she looked at Mukhtar and said, we did it, and they both cried together. They had indeed come very far from where they started. Mukhtar's mother assured them everything was going to be alright, but was it? After they had their formal English wedding at the registry, Mukhtar returned back to his base at Dubai. But meanwhile, all this time, Samia's family had been looking for her. They didn't know where she went. They thought initially that she was at one of her friend's house and they kept showing up at her door demanding to see her. The friend could not open up to them to tell them the truth, so she kept avoiding them. After the secret wedding, Samia did show up at home, but she still didn't tell her family that she was divorced from Shakil and now married to Mukhtar. In October of 2014, just a month after her wedding to Mukhtar, Samia and her female cousin were taking a walk and they were attacked by some guys. The weird thing about this attack was that the guys focused on Samia alone, leaving her cousin. They targeted her legs as they struck her repeatedly with iron rods, almost like they wanted to break her bones and cripple her. The bizarre part of this was that no one in her family cared that this happened to her. She sent a text to her friend. She said, quote, I went to the hospital and told the police they hit me with a bar. My left leg hurts badly, can barely walk, and my family didn't bother with me, end quote. This incident makes one to wonder and think they were actually responsible for this attack in a bid to punish her for the time she left the house and they didn't know where she went. It was like, let's say how you will use those legs to disappear from the home again. After the attack, all Samia was waiting for was her visa to come through so she could go join her secret husband Mukhtar in Dubai. So she did absolutely everything to keep it a secret from her family, but eventually they found out and all hell broke loose. Samia's mother threw her personal belongings out of the house. It was a lot that happened on that day. The family found out about her being divorced and married to another man. That Samia had to even call the cops because she feared for her safety. The confusion went on for days, and all the family members, cousins, uncles, and aunties were hurling insults at Samia and telling her how she was a disgrace to the family. They asserted that her divorce was not valid since the Islamic Sharia Council had no legal authority either in the UK or in Pakistan, which was actually true. Therefore, they said she was still legally married to Shakil and her so-called second marriage was a sham amounting to adultery. It was that adultery they were focusing on, that she was committing adultery, so they basically turned against her. And each time they had the brawl, she had the police listening in at all times. She was so scared for her life. She wanted them to be aware should anything happen to her. The West Yorkshire police were all aware of what was happening to Samia at the time. Samia lived in constant fear at her family house. She was very jumpy and always watching her back. Mukhtar, all the way in Dubai, was feeling uneasy about her staying there at the family house under that scary atmosphere. So he did all he could to fasten her visa. She couldn't go out of the house, so her friends ran all the errands for her behind the scenes, unbeknownst to her family, and then she left when all of it was said. In May of 2015, Samia permanently moved to Dubai to stay with her husband. She loved it in Dubai. She was sending pictures to her friends, showing them all of Dubai. Her Snapchat was just full of her living and loving life with a new husband. She even got a job at a property company in Dubai. So she would drive to and from work. She was so proud of herself. She showed her friends how she was not allowed to drive, something she had always wanted to do back in the UK, but was never allowed to do. Let me tell you what this cunning family did immediately Samia moved to Dubai. Samia's parents reported her as a missing person to the local police rather than accepting that she was now living life on her own terms and coming clean with the police. They claimed she was missing. The police opened a missing person investigation and contacted, amongst others, the Shia cleric from the Islamic Sharia Council of UK. That's the one who had issued an expurgatory divorce for Samia. It was that Shia cleric that told them the truth of what was going on and that she wasn't missing, and the family were aware she was not missing. Samia's family, after this, diverted their anger towards the imam, and they began to call him, to insult and harass him. He was so wise to record them all and pass on all of the recordings and abuses to the police. So Samia, while in Dubai, missed her friends and family in the UK though. To keep in touch, she would blast Adele's music on repeat, and she told her friends all her kids were born in the UK. She wanted kids badly, and she fantasized about having a mini her, but something was bothering Samia badly, even though she was happy living with Mukhtar in Dubai. Her family situation was something she couldn't let go of. She missed them so much, and as the months went by and they still didn't want to talk to her, she asked one of her friends to please get a picture of her parents and send them to her so she could at least see how they were, if they were well and all that. She really wanted to talk to her parents and ask for their forgiveness for the way she handled things. Even though she wasn't regretting fighting for her happiness, she wanted them to forgive her. So eventually, her sister and cousins began to pick her calls, and every day Samia would call them and beg them to help convince her parents to talk to her. Eventually, her mother also began to pick up her calls, and she made her even talk to Mukhtar, her husband, but her father still wouldn't budge. The few times Samia's father spoke with Mukhtar, he constantly repeated for him to leave her, leave her, leave her. That's all he said in all their conversation. He didn't want to hear anything. He wanted Mukhtar to divorce Samia, but Mukhtar told him he couldn't do that. Samia did all she could to make her family, especially her father, forgive her, but it didn't work. Eventually, he wouldn't even pick her calls anymore. The little progress they had made was destroyed. Samia's sister told her their father was done with her and didn't want to ever see her anymore. This hurt her to a core. All she was trying to do was to be happy. So in September of 2015, Samia decided to go to London to see her family face to face. She missed them. She wanted to fix them. She wanted for them to understand her. Her mother came to get her from the airport and took her to meet her dad, who just started bawling the moment he sighted his daughter. Samia apologized to him and tells him how sorry she was for what she did. They were in the middle of talking and working things out when out of nowhere some aunties got involved and began to instigate Samia's father against her again, reminding him of how shameful what she did was and how dishonorable it was. So every progress they made just basically crumbled. Samia sent a voice message to her husband Mukhtar after this. She says, quote, "The parents whom I cried for whilst I was away are not mine no more. My kids will never see them, never hear them. I am broken. That's it. My only pride is you and you alone." End quote. So she returns back to Dubai, and 10 months after this, things began to happen. So one day, Mukhtar gets a call from one of Samia's cousins. She tells him that her aunt, which is Samia's ex-husband Shakil's mother, had passed away. So he should tell Samia. Samia was sad when she heard the news. Even though she didn't like the idea of marrying her son, she was her favorite auntie and she loved her very much. She told her husband she wanted to go to Pakistan that period, but Mukhtar refused. After all that had happened, going to Pakistan was out of it. He wasn't going to let her go. But in the weeks that followed, Samia's family all of a sudden began to bombard her with calls and text messages. They told her that her father was sick and on the verge of dying, and she needed to come over to Pakistan ASAP before he passes away. Now, Samia's father had been struggling with his health for years, and he wasn't exactly a healthy man, but he wasn't so sick for him to be almost passing away. But Samia thought maybe because he was in Pakistan for his sister's burial, everything happening had taken a toll on him and had worsened his health. She texted one of her friends in the UK telling her how much she missed her parents, especially her dad, who was in Pakistan. She said she wants to see them badly, but going to Pakistan was a very, very huge risk that she didn't want to take. It was then she told her that her ex-husband Shakil had also called her crying, and she was told he was going crazy over his mother's demise. And she really wanted to be with her family in all of these trying times, but she was so afraid of going to Pakistan. There was no assurance that she'll be able to leave Pakistan in one piece if she sets her foot there. The text messages and the numerous calls from her family members kept coming in. If your father passed away without you seeing him, how would you feel? What would you do? His demise would be on you if you don't get to have a final talk with him. And that blackmail worked because at that point, Samia just wanted to be with her father. So she decided to go. Her friends, her husband told her not to go. They knew that coming back was no guarantee if she went to Pakistan. But she said she would not forgive herself if anything happens to her dad. She sends a text message to her friends. She says, pray for me that I should come back alive because of my psycho cousin Shakil. So she knew that her biggest concern was Shakil. I mean, he had already shot someone over a land dispute before. Nothing is above him. You can't put anything past him. He could easily do anything to her for divorcing him and ruining his chances of moving to the UK. Samia's family so much wanted her to be in Pakistan. Her sister got her a ticket without her husband Mukhtar's knowledge. She only told him after she had gotten the ticket and began to pack for the trip. Mukhtar says, quote, I was upset about it, but I was helpless. What could I have done? How am I going to face her for the rest of my life knowing that her father was not well and I stopped her and something happened to him, so I had to let her go, end quote. Mukhtar drives Samia to the airport on the day she was to fly to Pakistan, which was on the 14th of July 2016. The plan was for her to spend just 1 week and return to Dubai on the 21st. As Mukhtar pulled up at the car park, she tried one more time to change her mind. She looks at him and says, nothing will happen to me, I'll be fine. And that was the last time Mukhtar would see his wife Samia alive. Samia's friends to this day do not understand why she went to Pakistan. They who were all from that community knew what going to Pakistan meant. What her family could not do to her in the UK, they would definitely do to her in Pakistan. When Samia arrived in Pakistan that July the 14th, she spent her first night at a friend's house. While she was there, she took the opportunity to hide her passport and her return ticket at this friend's house. She told her friend never to reveal its location to any member of her family. The next day, being the 15th, she gets herself a new SIM card and sends the number to Mukhtar so he could contact her on it. On the 18th, Samia tells Mukhtar that she was going to meet her dad and both of them will go and visit her auntie's grave. So basically, she was feeding her husband with every information as to how she was moving, just in case. On the 19th, Mukhtar sends Samia a text. He says he had a nightmare that woke him up in shock, but he couldn't remember it anymore. I'm assuming the bad dream was about Samia because she replies that Mukhtar should pray for her so she can come back home safely to Dubai. By July the 20th, Mukhtar chats with Samia. She tells him she was going to the market to buy foodstuff to cook, then she prepared to fly out the next day, being the 21st. By that afternoon of the 20th, Mukhtar expected to have gotten another update from Samia, but there was nothing. So he texted her at about 3 p.m, but there was no response. By 3:05, he sends another text asking her to call him or text back ASAP, but still there was no response. By 22 minutes past 5 p.m, Mukhtar is now fully worried. He tries to reach Samia again, telling her he's really worried. She should reach him if she can, but Samia still didn't respond. By 6 p.m, Mukhtar is now frantically trying to reach Samia. He is calling and texting, but there was no response. But meanwhile, events were already unfolding in Pakistan. While Mukhtar was trying so hard to reach Samia from Dubai, the Pakistani police at the Mangla police station had received a call from a man. The call was answered by one Muhammad Naveed. According to him, the man on the other end was crying on the phone that his daughter had passed away. This man was calling from Pandori village and he was none other than Muhammad Shahid, Samia's father. Immediately the police got this call. They mobilized and went to Pandori village to the house where the call had come from, and there at the foot of some stairs they found the lifeless body of Samia Shahid. Samia's father told the officers at the scene that Samia had been living with her husband Shakil at the time of her demise, but we all know that wasn't true. Samia would never ever expose herself like that. She wasn't staying with him while in Pakistan. And the fact that her father was still calling Shakil her husband was just very disturbing. He knew she was divorced from him. He knew she had been married to Mukhtar for some years now. So what was that for? What story was he trying to put out there? He took the police around the house and showed them exactly where the incident had happened. He said she fell down the staircase. Now, the police didn't doubt that. They just wanted to know where Samia's alleged husband was in all of this, so they asked to speak with Shakil, but Shakil was nowhere to be found. Samia's father said he didn't know where he was. In fact, no one in the family claimed to know where he went. I mean, they saw him before whatever happened to Samia had happened, so where had he disappeared to after her demise? This alone was an eyebrow-raising situation for the police. Where on earth will a man who had just lost his wife in an alleged freak accident vanish to while she was still lying on the cold floor? It just didn't make any sense. The police insisted on seeing Shakil, but as time passed, they realized he had actually gone into hiding, and that made them very suspicious of him. So Samia's body was taken away to the hospital for an autopsy, but before it was concluded, her uncle Nawaz obtained a certificate stating that she had passed away from natural causes. So she was buried the very same day she passed away according to Islamic rites. Meanwhile, back in Dubai, Mukhtar was frantically calling and texting Samia, hoping she would just pick up and say, sorry, I wasn't by my phone, but Samia did not respond. So he began to send Samia's sister WhatsApp messages asking to speak with Samia. He told her he had been trying to get a hold of her for a while now to no avail. Samia's sister's behavior got Mukhtar worried even the more. She was reading the chat quite okay, but she wasn't responding, and this left Mukhtar thinking, what on earth is going on? By 10 p.m. that night, one of Samia's cousins called Mukhtar and told him the most heartbreaking thing he had ever heard, that Samia had passed away earlier in the day from a heart attack and had been buried according to Islamic rites. Mukhtar at first did not take that information seriously. The thoughts that crossed his mind at first was that the family was just still angry with Samia and him, so they had maybe seized her passport, her cell phone, so she wouldn't be able to leave Pakistan. So he still hoped and believed that she was alive, so he got himself on the next available flight to Pakistan to go and rescue his wife. So 3 days after Samia had passed away, Mukhtar arrives in Pakistan and goes straight to the police. He told the police his wife Samia had come to Pakistan and now she was missing. Mukhtar came prepared. He had with him the wedding certificates and the pictures. The police, when they saw the pictures, quickly realized this is the same Samia that was said to have fallen down the stairs 3 days prior. But the knowledge that Mukhtar was the real husband and not Shakil, as her family had claimed, turned the case on its head. So if Mukhtar was Samia's husband, who then was Shakil? So now the police wanted to know what Shakil knew about Samia's demise because it was now looking very fishy. Even the police now began to feel like the family had done something to Samia themselves and were hiding it. They are too familiar with the situations like this, so they knew immediately that Samia had been murdered in the name of honor. But now they have to prove it. When the news got to Samia's friends in the UK that she was deceased and buried, it came as a shock to them because they believed that since she had been safe up until the 20th without incident, she would be safe to go back to Dubai on the 21st. All over Pakistan, the news about Samia began to spread like wildfire. The BBC contacted her father Shahid for an interview and he obliged. But during the interview, this man Shahid denied that he ever heard or knew of the existence of Mukhtar, Samia's husband. When he was asked what happened to Samia, he said he had gone to their house, that's the house Samia allegedly lived in with Shakil, and saw her just laying at the foot of the stairs, and then he proceeded to call the police. He also told the BBC Udo that according to the autopsy, there was no signs of violence or struggling on Samia's body that pointed towards any foul play. He insisted he too wanted to know what had happened to his daughter. He said Samia was married to Shakil and living with him, and he had never heard of Mukhtar before in his life, so he doesn't understand why this Mukhtar just pops up from nowhere to blackmail them all. He claims all the marriage documents and pictures Mukhtar brought with them were all fake. Really? This man knew Mukhtar very well and had spoken to him before, telling him to leave his daughter. We all know that that was all lies he told in that interview, including the autopsy report he gave, which we shall be talking about shortly. How can this man, whom his daughter adored so much, be spinning all these lies to cover up for what her family had done to her? Meanwhile, the family itself could not even keep their story straight. I guess they didn't plan out the things they would say after the fact. They thought that after murdering Samia, they would just call the police, cook up some stories, and Samia would be buried and forgotten. They didn't anticipate that Mukhtar would show up and fight for justice, or that their actions would gain international media attention. So they were just basically all over the place with their lies. Some said Samia passed away from an asthmatic attack that she had never been diagnosed with. Others said she fell down the stairs. Some said it was a heart attack. Others said she purposely hurt herself, which Samia would never do considering she had Mukhtar in her life. Her friends in the UK were so angry, they went straight to the police to report that a British citizen had been murdered in Pakistan. The police immediately contacted Naz Shah, the MP representing Bradford West constituency, for her help. Naz, when she heard Samia's story, said she knew immediately without a doubt that she had been a victim of an honor killing. So Naz wrote a letter directly to the Pakistani Prime Minister at the time, and when he got that letter, the case got more intense. Investigators were sent from the capital, Lahore, to find out exactly what had happened to Samia. But meanwhile, Shaki, after 8 days of hiding, had crawled out into the open. So investigators immediately took him and Shahid, Samia's father, in for questioning. It was then they knew the exact truth of what had happened to Samia. So what had happened was that Shaki, when he saw Samia, had vowed never to let her leave Pakistan again. He insisted that Samia must get a divorce from Mukhtar and remain married to him, something the rest of the family agreed to. So day and by day, Shaki and Samia's family members went through her stuff looking for her passport and return ticket so they could seize them, but they couldn't find them. Unknown to them, Samia anticipated this and hid them at her friend's house. So after speaking to Mukhtar that morning and telling him she was going back to, pack up and prepare for her trip back to Dubai, she discovers her luggage had been taken to the house her father had initially built for her and Shakil when they had gotten married. So she went to retrieve her luggage. It was there Shakil tried to rough handle her into staying in Pakistan. She refused that she wasn't going to stay, so there was a heated argument between them. So what did the monster do? He beat her up and forced himself on her brutally as she screamed and screamed, but no one came to help her, not even her nuclear family who knew what was happening. After Shakil was done assaulting her, she managed to run out of the room, telling him that she would go to the British authorities. So he catches her, then he used her scarf to strangle her, while Muhammad Shahid, her own father, held down her legs, allegedly. Now, back to the autopsy I had talked about earlier. Remember Shahid had told the BBC Urdu that Samia had no signs of foul play on her, right? Well, the autopsy had actually shown that she had been suffocated. Her COD was actually asphyxiation. How can a father lie like this? Well, one that can hold down his own daughter so life can be squeezed out of her. Both Shaki and Muhammad Shahid, Samia's father, were arrested after this as they continued to deny any wrongdoing. On the 14th of August 2016, Shaki, however, confessed to strangling Samia, even though he said that verbal confessions in Pakistan are not admissible in court because some innocent people were forced to confess under duress. I don't believe Shaki was under duress. After all, he had the Dear Law of Pakistan. Muhammad Shahid had told Shaki he had nothing to worry about and had every intention to pardon his nephew if he had been charged with Samia's murder under the Dear Law of Pakistan. Following the intervention of MP Naz Shah and the Pakistani government taking interest in the case, the original lead investigator was suspended from duty for mishandling the case and for allowing Samia's mother and sister to leave Pakistan. And then he was arrested for concealing evidence. I am not sure what evidence that was, but Samia's uncle Nawaz, having allegedly obtained the death certificate before the forensic examination had been concluded, was also arrested on suspicion of falsifying medical files. In conclusion, the then Deputy Inspector General of Police Abubakar Books said that Samia's death was a premeditated and cold-blooded honor killing. He says, quote, "We have completed our investigation and concluded that her ex-husband Muhammad Shahid and father Muhammad Shahid were involved in her killing," end quote. Shakir was charged for assaulting Samia. I am not exactly sure what came of that, but he has never been tried for her murder. Muhammad Shahid was held in custody from July 2016 until being granted bail by Lahore High Court in December of 2016. The court deemed that the evidence presented was insufficient to justify holding him on remand. He would later on pass away in a Lahore hospital in January of 2018, 2 years later, at the age of 52. Howard's the uncle was also let out of bail in September 2016. The next month, in October of 2016, arrest warrants were issued for Samia's mother Imtiaz Bibi and sister Madiha Shahid, and Pakistani authorities declared them proclaimed offenders, whatever that means. Shakir was held till September of 2018 before he was released on bail. Remember, he had admitted strangling Samia, but like I said earlier, confessions given to the police verbally are not admissible as evidence in Pakistan. Meanwhile, in August of 2016, members of Samia's family in Pakistan sought criminal charges against Samia and Mukhtar Kazam, accusing them of polyandry. They claimed that documents had been forged and Samia's ex-husband had been impersonated in order for them to get married in the United Kingdom. They wanted Mukhtar and others to be charged with the impersonation, fraud, and fornication. How do you charge someone that is already deceased? I don't even understand, but that was what her family did. At the end of the day, Samia's family turned on her for dishonoring their family with her second marriage. But as for Shakil, I know he was angry with Samia because the divorce impeded his chance of moving to the United Kingdom and becoming a British citizen. That's his own problem. He wasn't a man of honor. He was just an ex-convict who wanted to use his cousin for papers. How can a family think it's honorable for a man to assault and murder their child, but it's dishonorable for her to fall in love and marry a man she truly loves? I don't even understand. On the 21st of February 2018, the BBC produced a documentary on Samia's case, and that had really helped me in my research. Watching that documentary gave me some much insight into what Samia's life was like. But the story doesn't end here. After the release of the documentary, Samia's sister Madia gave an interview where she told her own side of the story. She talked about the horror and grueling effect of mainstream media on her family because of what had happened to Samia. She said, contrary to the way her family was portrayed, they were not strict on them. In fact, Samia had a very determined personality. Our parents have always encouraged us to achieve our ambitions in life, end quote. She said that Samia was never forced to marry her cousin Shakil. It was she who chose Shakil as her husband out of many suitors, and she was happy marrying him and was ecstatic at her wedding, which was a 4-day event. She said after spending a month with her husband in Pakistan, she returned to the UK but went back to Pakistan by herself. I think she said this was in December of 2012 to be with Shakil for 6 full months. So why were the media making it look like she was forced into this horrible marriage that she hated? She said Shakil was doing work for himself in Pakistan, so coming over to the UK was not important to him. He in fact didn't even submit a visa application, talk more of it being denied as was reported in the media. Madiha goes on to say Samia had met Mukhtar Kazam on social media, not in the restaurant, as Mukhtar has said and her friends have said in late 2013, and they began a relationship. And Samia would travel to Dubai to visit him, which was contrary to the news that her family wasn't allowing her out. As for the mugging attack on Samia and her cousin, she claims Samia wasn't singled out in the attack, that the cousin too was beaten and injured in that attack. So basically, Madiha was poking holes in everything that was said to have happened to her sister. As for Mukhtar, Madiha believes that he purposely, lured her sister into a secret relationship, knowing fully well that she was married, just so he could get her over to Dubai to work for him as a slave to take care of him and his family, because she could earn more as a British citizen. When Samia started working in Dubai, according to her sister, she will hand over her paycheck to Mukhtar, who will give her stipends to get her to back from work, and that contrary to the pictures Samia was sending to her friends, her life with Mukhtar in Dubai was far from glamorous, and that she lived in workers' colony as against the pictures that she sent to her friends of her building apartment, and was confined to the line of wearing burqa 24/7. Madiha basically said Samia passed away from an asthmatic attack and that she was in fact actively trying to conceive with her husband Shakil. They had even visited a fertility clinic in Pakistan within the days leading up to her demise. Listen guys, it's a lot Madiha said. I don't have an opinion about this. I can only bring to you this case based on the fact that evidence is out there. Let me know what you think of this in the comment section. Is Madiha right? Was Samia really trying to have a child with Shakil? How would that even be possible when she was married to Mukhtar? Was her demise of natural causes, or this was all in the name of honor? Let me know what you think in the comment section based on all the facts that have been laid out. Well, that's it for today's case, guys. This case was so emotionally draining for me. I pray anyone who is currently going through what Samia went through gets the help that they need before it gets too late. Before you go, please subscribe if you haven't. Click on that notification bell so you don't miss any of my uploads. And also click the like button, give the video a thumbs up so that YouTube can, show it to other viewers. Until next time, take care of you and yours.